Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing good. Um, it's been a week. It's been a week, so hope everybody's doing good. I'm excited. We had a good event in DC this past weekend. For those that joined us, it was quite a good. It was a very good event. Um, and so what we wanted to do was the purpose of this webinar tonight is to just go over all the things we went over in DC, right? And so I want to go over those things because some of you all couldn't make it, and some of you all obviously don't live in the DC area, and so I know a lot of you all wanted to talk about those things. So we're going to go over those things today, and the main thing we're going to go over is the three main things to help you close that gap when it comes to retirement. For those that are starting to plan for retirement late, or have a plan, but you just want to make sure everything is on point. These three things that we're going to cover tonight are the things that when we're having our retirement sessions with folk in our TSP Finishline process, these are the three things that come up the most, and also the things that we see that make the biggest difference when it comes to retirement, right? And so with that, one of the things that we talked about in DC, that was a big thing, and this was a big thing for me personally, right? When I started Fed Legacy now 17 years ago, which has gone by so fast, the thing that motivated me the most was just being a Washingtonian, growing up in the DMV area. A lot of my family, I got about 11 family members that work for the federal government. Then a lot of friends of family that work in the federal government, and so that was our community. That was the pathway to middle class income for African Americans in the DC area. And the thing that I've seen this last year or so many of those people who worked their entire lives for the government, provided a middle class lifestyle for their family, is under attack, right? And so the thing that's making this that I'm so passionate about is because at this time where so many people are losing their jobs unexpectedly, not really prepared, because there's a lot of fear in the marketplace. There's a lot of panic, and so when that happens, you can see money switch hands pretty quickly. And so for me, the reason why I'm so passionate about this, the reason why, I've been doing these Wednesday webinars quite frequently, and, you see all the emails from me, is because my thing is I want to make sure that my community, when this wealth, transfers and has opportunity to grow, that it's growing in the right hands, right things are being done, and there aren't people out there taking advantage of people like yourself. And you're doing the right things, because sometimes you see a lot of people, they take advantage of people when there's a lot of fear, and then who knows what happens to that money, right? So I want to make sure my community is doing the right thing. So that is why we started Fed Legacy 17 years ago, right? Just growing up in the DC. Again, tons and tons of family. I got 11 family members, aunts and uncles and things like that, cousins that work in Social Security Administration in Baltimore, right? Just because that's where my mom is from. My mom has 7 brothers and sisters, and tons of that extended family work at Social Security. So this is near and dear to me. So I just wanted to start off explaining that so you understand who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And so when it comes to retirement, the 3 biggest threats as far as retirement goes right now, number 1 is taxes, and I think that's the biggest threat. Income plan, not having the proper income planning, and then market conditions, right? And I think taxes are number 1. And I'm explaining to you why taxes are number 1. A lot of times you hear people and they talk about, market conditions, not understanding your TSP, not doing proper income planning. Those typically are what most advisors would say are number 1 and 2. But to me, taxes is number 1 by far. And I've talked about this over and over and over again. And a lot of that changed once 2019 hit with the Secure Act, right? And so when it comes to taxes, we don't know where it's going, right? I know right now, Trump is trying to pass his bill, and, he talked about, well, taxes are going to be lower because, we're lowering the deficit. And that's the whole reason why we have all these government cuts, et cetera. But then when you come to find out, well, no, baked in that is this $3 trillion deficit increase, which at the end of the day, we have deficit increases like that. What do you think happens, right? When you have deficits like that, who pays for it, right? Who pays for it, and when do you pay for it, right? In 2019, what I always talk about is how in the Secure Act, they baked in this 10-year rule that basically forces your kids and your grandkids, if to have a huge tax bill when it comes to them receiving your TSP money, if you still have it in your traditional TSP or any traditional IRA. And so that was one of those things that is a way of getting a lot of that tax revenue back. In the past, you could do what's called a stretch IRA, which if your kids receive the money, they can push the taxes due all the way out into their 72, which allowed them to structure it a little bit better, or pass the money on to their kids, and so on and so on, which didn't allow them to have to pay the IRS, or they could take small amounts of money as needed, which again allowed them to control the tax revenue. But now, as of 2019, thanks to the Secure Act, that's no longer the case. Now your kids have 10 years to be able to take the money from the traditional TSP or traditional IRA and put it into the tax-free bucket, right? And I mean, and they have to take that money as income. Now, I'll ask you all this. When it comes to your TSP, right, there's traditional TSP and there's Roth TSP. I bet you more than likely, how many of you all have more money in your traditional TSP versus your Roth TSP, right? I bet you more than mostly everybody on this call is going to say they have more money in their traditional TSP. And the reason why that is you're just like most Americans, right? Most Americans have their money, the majority of their wealth, stored into a traditional IRA, a 401k, or traditional TSP. The issue with that is that money, you have a silent partner. That silent partner is the IRS, right? The IRS still has an investment in that account, right? So let's say you have 500,000. If you have 500,000 in your traditional TSP today, you might have own 20% of that. But depending on how the tax bill goes, now that the IRS can change that to now 25%, right? If that money goes to your kids, depending on what their taxable income is at the time, that could be 37% of that, right? That amount that they have that the IRS owns is not under your control, right? Depending on how tax bills change, that depends on how much you're taxed there, right? And so I don't know if you're like, if you're anything like me, I want to have complete control over how much I pay the IRS, right? And so that is why you need tax strategies, because again, if there's a huge deficit and the IRS knows they got, and the government knows they have to get some of that money back, then they can create policy like they did with the Secure Act to get more of that money, and you can't do anything about it, right? The only thing you can do, you can do something about it. The thing you can do is you can get as much as your money out of those traditional accounts as sooner than later under the current tax laws, because the current tax laws, what they are, number one, and then and there's benefits to the tax laws now because they're a little bit lower than they were in the past, right? And so when it comes to getting ready to retire, you want to make sure you have a tax strategy where you can control how the money flows, right? And so one of the things, tax rates have been up in the past, and now the highest tax rate bracket is at 37. Like I said, we don't know where this is going to go, but we do know that it can change, in the blink of an eye. But we want to make sure that we have control over that, right? And so what I want to do is just show you a quick example of what you can do, right? What you can do when it comes to making sure you control the tax story and how much the IRS gets from you and your kids, right? And so this is Linda. Linda had $950K in her TSP. If she waited until R&D, she paid over $500K in taxes, and that includes like the growth and things like that, right? And so, and one other thing from that Secure Act, right? From the Secure Act, the required minimum distribution age used to be 70. Now it's out to 74, right? Because they had the Secure Act and they had Secure Act 2.0, and it ultimately pushed the required minimum distribution age out to 74 years old. Most people thought that was a good thing. But the issue with that is, again, if they give you 4 more years, all that really is giving you 4 more years for the IRS to have growth. Now, if you don't take action in converting money over, then it's not really a great thing, because if you say you're getting 5-6% a year in interest, that you say you retired and you had 500,000 when you retired, and now your 500,000 has grown to 700,000 over that time period. That increased interest also increased the cut of the IRS, right? So the longer it sits, the longer they have to collect interest off you. So, again, without a plan, that's not a great thing. With the plan, it gives you more time to do the conversions you need to do to make sure you get as much money tax-free as possible, right? So with Linda, what we did was we looked at her tax bracket. We saw that we could roll 77K a year. And what we did it at her, because she was retired, we're doing it now. We're in the process of doing this. We're in the process of it, because her taxes are lower now. She's in a lower tax bracket. We're doing the Roth conversions in that lower tax bracket. And so, that saves her over 200. That would save her over $200,000 in taxes over time, just in her living time. But with her kids, now when they receive the money, it's tax free, because if they would inherit the 950, if let's say her son's making $120,000 a year, now he has to take an extra $100,000 almost a year on top of that, and pushes him up into one of the higher tax brackets, which now the IRS is getting 32% of his money because, he has to inherit that money at that rate. Now, when he inherits that money, the taxes are already paid on it at that lower tax bracket that Linda paid it on, right? And so just in her lifetime, it's 200K, but if over his, if we calculate what it would be if he would inherit the 950, it's a much higher number, right? And so one of the things you want to do is you want to do Roth conversions. Next year, TSP is allowing you to do it within your TSP account. It's a little bit complicated the way the wording is, but make sure you began to do Roth conversions. Obviously, we can help you with that, but again, if you want to do it yourself, you can definitely do it yourself. But you want to make sure you talk to your accountant. And all you're doing is you're looking at your tax brackets that you have every year, seeing how much you are to the next tax bracket, and then you're moving money. And converting just means you're moving money from your traditional TSP to your Roth TSP, or you're doing it from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. And every year you're paying the taxes, but you're doing it strategically so that you're staying within a certain tax bracket. And when you do that, you're just paying the taxes early, because as that money grows, you want that money now to be growing tax-free, right? And so that's the tax side of things, right? The next side of things, and again, the reason why I'm moving through this kind of quickly, because I like to keep these calls 30 minutes. It's a Wednesday night, people have family. I know I have family. So I just want to give you the information. Obviously, we can schedule a call to talk about that stuff. Just go to fedlegacycall.com and schedule that, or just say you want to schedule a call in the link. In the chat, just put plan in the chat, and we'll make sure we reach out to you. But the next piece is income, right? And so when you're working, your money has a job, right? And that job, the job that your money has, is when you're working, your money, the number one job is you want it to grow, right? If I was to ask you, what's the number one thing you want your money to do while you're working? You want it to grow, right? Which makes sense. But when you're retired, and we're having our retirement sessions, and we ask this question every time, me and all of our advisors, is, well, what do you want to see with your money now? And then without fail, 9 out of 10 times, it's some variation of, I don't want it to run out. I don't want my money to run out. And the reason why that is because technically you're unemployed at this point, right? You've made all your money. Now the money that you put away, that has to sustain you for the rest of your life. Now you have Social Security and pension, but in essence, you're not really getting another paycheck for the rest of your life. The money that you're getting now is money that you've worked for, and now you're receiving it on the receiving end of whatever you work for, right? And so now you have to be strategic. And so when it comes to that, you want to make sure you have a strategy in place. So I want to introduce you to two families, right? We've changed the names, obviously, and obviously it's just an example, but we got the Hills and the Browns, right? And in this example, the Hills retired in 2020. The Hills retired. The Browns retired in 2010, right? And they both retired with the same amount of money, $500,000, using it, and they both use what's a very popular term, is the 4% rule, where you take 4% of your account and you use that as income, right? So they both did the same thing. They both used the 4% rule, and they both left their money in the TSPC fund, right? And these are actual returns, right? And so the Hills for their 500,000 did the 4% rule, took 20,000 a year for the income, and they retired in the 2020 timeframe. And from 2020 to 2029, they left their money in the C fund. At the end of that, they were left with 224,000, right? Now, they retired at 65. Now they're 75. They're at the 224,000 at the end of that 10-year stretch, right? Now, 224,000 for a married couple in their retirement savings at that age, a long-term care disaster, can cause them a lot of problems, right? Because the average couple is going to spend about $400,000 in long-term care costs, right? And so, that's according to Blue Cross Blue Shield. That was 2 years ago, right? 400,000 is what is the average cost, right? And so 224,000 is not enough, right? Not saying that they've run out of money, but they're starting to sweat a little bit. They're not spending as much on vacations. They're sweating a little bit because that's not the number that they wanted it to be, right? Now, the same amount of money. The Browns retired in 2010. The market had a good run in 2010, right? They're taking that same 4%, but at the end of that 10-year run, they're left with 1.3 million, right? From that 500,000. Now, I ask you, which family would you rather be, right? The Hills or the Browns? Now, most people would say they would rather be the Browns, but here's my answer to that. You don't want to be either one of them, because what happened in this situation is both of them took risk, right? Now, the Hills went to the casino, rolled the dice, and almost crapped out, whereas the Browns went in and won. But it was still a crapshoot, right? Because the market, they can't control the market. The market just so happened to do good in those 10 years. We don't know what the next 10 years are going to look like, right? This year has been interesting, right? We just don't know. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to put your retirement at the whims of the market. What you want to do is you want to have a plan that makes sense. Now, most people, when they have a plan and they're retiring, they want to move all their money to the G fund and say, all right, I made my money, I want to do that, which is not a horrible plan, but the way inflation has been going the last couple of years, is a tough plan. Again, with all the spending that's going on, and one of the things that me and my guys have been talking about on our call is just how expensive health insurance has gotten the last couple of years. I know about 5 years ago, even up until like 2-3 years ago, when we're doing our retirement planning sessions, I can pretty much, if it's a married couple, most people we talk to are in their late 50s to mid 60s, right? Most people, right? And so when we're having those conversations, you're married, we can pretty much pencil in what the health insurance costs are going to be. And so, and doing it for so many years, I've been doing this for so many years. It usually was around $200 to $300 was what a married couple were paying in health insurance, $400 at the max, right? But now what we're seeing is married couples are paying upwards of $800, and it's pretty normal. Like $700 to $800 is like the amount of money that most married couples are paying for health insurance now in retirement. What does that mean? That's an example of inflation, right? And it hit me the other day. I'm like, why? I'm like, these are a lot higher than they were, a couple of years ago. And what I had to realize, like, that's just the new norm. Health insurance is costing this amount of money every month now for couples, right? But again, that's just an example of inflation. And so, especially when we talk about inflation, a lot of times they talk about, they talk about groceries, travel and things like that, right? And those typically stay with the inflation reported, the average of 3.2% a year over the last 100 years, what they say the average inflation is, right? Or last couple of years has been around 6%. But healthcare inflation is higher than that, right? And so those are the type of things we have to keep in mind. So why do I say that? Sitting your money in the G fund alone won't work in moments like that, because your money's just not growing big enough, right? And so the thing that we talk about at Fed Legacy is making sure you have your financial house built. And what that looks like is having safe money, right? The money that you need for income, like I was talking earlier with those two couples, that money can sit in a safe account. That money, and then with these safe accounts, you want to make sure that you're outpacing inflation, but having that income money sit in a separate account, right? Safe money could also be money that you want to have for long-term care, that you might want to when you might have a health issue and you say, Mr. Smith, I want to make sure we have this amount of money sitting aside. That type of money goes into the safe account. And it could be annuities that could do this for you. If you want to say TSP, definitely stay in the G fund, have it in cash, whatever it is. It's just you want to have that foundation money set aside, right? Then you have your walls. That's more so strategy type stuff, right? Where you have your Roth conversions, right? The money you're using for Roth conversions, the money you're using to combat inflation, minimizing your tax inflation. That's your walls. Those are the things you want to insulate yourself from in retirement, because your two biggest threats in retirement is going to be inflation, your outside threats, right? That's inflation and taxes, right? And then the last piece is your roof, and that's your growth money. This is the money that you want to continually be in the market, right? The TSPC fund's a great place to have your money. The problem with the Browns and the Hills is if you have your money in the C fund and you're drawing income off of it, when you're drawing income in down markets, it can cause that money to collapse faster. That's why you don't want to be drawing money in accounts like that. You want to draw money in more safer accounts that don't have the market fluctuation, right? And so, but you want to have some growth money, right? And so you want to have money in growth, and that's whether it's in the TSP, you have it in the C fund or SRI. Those are the stock funds. If you have it outside of TSP, you would have it in managed money, but you want that money to be, the whole goal of that money is for growth, because what that does, that balances out your account, that helps you bypass inflation, that helps you, leave the legacy you want to leave for your kids. All of that happens with that roof money. But that way you have these three layers, and those three layers give you the peace of mind that you deserve, honestly, right? And so one thing we talk a lot about at Fed Legacy is making sure that not only do you retire, but you retire with lifestyle, right? Because we're talking to clients and they're getting ready to retire, and we're like, what do you want to spend in vacations? People are like, well, I can't afford that much. And so we're like, no, like, put your dream vacation budget. If you want to take 3 trips a year, and then nice trips with your kids and grandkids, or just you and your spouse, or you by yourself, you and your friends, let's budget that in. And the way we do that is by creating this foundation, this financial house, so that you can have that money for the long run, and it's not threatening the money that you're using for your day-to-day or your long-term care, right? And the way to do that is having a plan. Because if you have all the money in one place and you don't have a strategy for it, it can be daunting for you, and you get scared and don't do anything. And so you want to have a plan for those things, right? And so that is why we build that financial house. So I know we have 5 more minutes left. I want to leave 5 minutes for questions. You can go here to book a call, fedlegacycall.com. But is there any questions that people have? If you have questions, you can just put it in the chat and we'll get to it. Okay. Okay, John, you can hear it now? Okay. All right. Helena, I definitely want to take advantage of the plan Roth conversion 2006. Should I start with specific amount? Helena, what we could do is we can hop on a call and go through that. The way to do that is you want to build out a financial plan first. And then from there, you could decide what's the proper amount. And then you also want to look at your previous year's tax returns, and look and see what's the most you can do. And then why having a financial plan matters is because it tells you how many years you'll take to do it. Because if you have 300,000 or 500,000, there's a difference in how long it would take, and there's a strategy that goes into that, right? But if you want to hop on a call, we could talk about that, so you can get it around. Okay. Okay, Miranda. Yeah, Dr. Mike, it will. It will. And after you retire is the best time to do it, just because your taxable income is lower at that point. Miranda, the type of mix I recommend, it just depends on the person. But I'll give you a rule that you can use. It's a high level rule, but it's called the rule of 100, right? And it talks about it's a rule that a lot of financial advisors use it on Wall Street. It's you take 100, you minus it by your age, and that's the amount of risk you should be taking. So if you're 100, if you're 60, that's 40% risk, right? That means 40% in the market. Now, what I would say this for federal employees, right? For federal employees, I like to reverse it, because that rule is a general rule for everybody. But most people don't have the type of security that federal employees have. So if you're working in the private industry, you don't have a pension. So your money has to be your long-term care plan, has to be your travel plan, has to be your income, and so your money's a lot more important. And that rule is made for everyone. But for federal employees, most federal employees that we run across, they're not using their TSP for income, like they're not using it for full amount of income. They're using it for some income, very small amount, but not the majority of their income. And so what I like to do is flip that, and it just depends on your risk tolerance, but flip that rule, right? Instead of saying 60 protected, make it 60 M risk, 40 protected as far as the mix goes for federal employees. But again, it depends on your risk tolerance, Miranda, but that's just a good rule of thumb in general, without us meeting with you and telling you exactly what it is. Obviously, we can do that. If you want to get on the call to talk about that, we can. But just giving you a general idea of the proper mix, that's the way. And Dr. Mike, I don't know, man, because if it's going to be available through TSP, the Roth conversion, what you're talking about, because it's new in 2026. But if you want to hop on a call, that's something we can help you execute. Tamika, there is no fee for a call. With us. We don't charge for a consultation. So we can talk to you and walk you through a process if you need to. What about investments in ETFs and REITs? Me personally, I love ETFs. Not a big REIT guy, but ETFs are great. Kim, they're great. In essence, the TSPs are ETFs because they're just index trading funds, right? And so the TSPs are ETFs. They're low cost. Each fund operates as an ETF. They're low fund. You exchange. You're trading on the exchange. You're not buying individual stocks, so there's less cost there. So ETFs are great. Natakia, we're here to help you. I hope I'm saying your name, not Takia, right? But I'm wishing you the best with that. We'd love to talk to you. Early retirement. Regarding early retirement, how do you suggest to transfer funds to lower my tax liability? Stacy, like I said, the way to do it, let me answer this question. You can do it yourself, right? And what you could do is look at your tax returns, if you have a good tax person, they should understand Roth conversions pretty well, and they can walk you through how to do it, how to lower your tax liability. If you don't, that's something we can help you with. We do it every day with clients. We have a CPA we work with to look over our client stuff, and you can use him if you want to look at your tax return, because that's the biggest thing you're going to pay for as federal employees is taxes and retirement, right? So you want to make sure you get that part right. But like I said, Stacy, we can help you with that as well. Kelly, can you talk about the supplement going away? Kelly, I would love to. I don't have a lot of time to talk about that tonight, but we could schedule a call the next webinar. We could talk about the 2028 FERS supplement changes. How often should I meet with my financial advisor? I have 6 years until I retire. I believe it's time. I would try to meet with them at least once a year, especially if you're going over, you're getting ready to retire. I don't know how old you are, but I would meet with them once a year. I'll meet with them once a year, for sure. Because you want to make, especially, and I would start putting more money towards my Roth TSP, because you gotta have your TSP for 5 years for it to for you to be able to take money out of your Roth TSP tax free, right? So I would start now if you got 6 more years left. All right, so I work for the TSP and I got $3 million in my TSP, none in the Roth, but still working. Can you help me because I'm 73 and I'm not? Yeah, Dr. Dwight, we could definitely help you with that. Because you're at the Roth you're at the RMD age, so we could definitely help you out with that. Now we might not be able to, you're not going to be able to convert all that money in that short amount of time, but you can make a dent and get ahead of it, and you'll still pay less taxes, right? It ultimately definitely your kids, right? And your spouse if you're married. But obviously we don't have enough time to convert all of that. We can definitely make a dent in it and I'll have my team reach out to you tomorrow. And Kelly, I'm so sorry about the first supplement question, but that's something that I would love to talk about next week. What we'll do is we'll talk about the first supplement question because that's just a bigger conversation. FedLegacyCall.com should be working. It's not working? Hold on. It worked for me. But either way, Sandra, what we'll do is I have my team reach out to you tomorrow to go through it, to get a time call. But we'll be back on next week. Thanks to Kelly. We'll talk about the FERS supplement and get those and talk about those 2028 changes and any other changes that affect the federal government employees. And that's it, everybody. Hope everybody got something out of the night, and we'll be back on next Wednesday. If you have any questions, just respond to the email. We'll send you a follow-up email and go through everything. But I like to just keep these tight. And so wishing you all the best, and talk to you all next week.